Hello and welcome to the lesson on walking and the gait cycle. You've got the text, so you might want to go through some of this as I go through this presentation. Some of the pictures I will be using you won't actually have in the text because I've added them in because I find it's a little easier for me to use as I go through, but the majority of the images you will already have. Now I'm sure most of us have one of these. Okay, so we've got an Apple Watch or a Fit Watch, and think about how many steps per day, which in reality will be around 8 to 12,000. But then what that means is we are physically contacting the ground, let's say 10,000, and that means we are going through 10,000 gait cycles every single day. But I'm sure there's many people out there going through 15,000, 20,000 and things like that. Now imagine if you run a marathon or you train for half marathons or 10Ks, you can imagine how many gait cycles you are going through each time. And do you not think that most of us just take it for granted? We just wake up, we go outside and we just take it for granted we can just walk to the shop without any problems. But if you got an issue with a knee or an ankle, then it can completely change how you go through the kinetic chain, and especially going through the gait cycle. So let's have a look at this. You've got the same picture now, and I've just added a few little bits onto it, okay? So if you look here, the stance phase is split into the heel strike, mid stance and propulsion, and then that's about 60%. And then we've got a part called the swing phase, which is around 40%. So this would be a gait cycle. So when the right leg, in this case, contacts the ground, it goes through the mid stance to then propulse, and then it goes through the swing phase, and then it contacts the ground again. Okay, so that would be known as one gait cycle. We'll come on to the position of the hip and knee because I have a better picture further on. This is another variation of heel strike, okay, or the gait cycle simplified, I should say. And then it contacts the ground, and then it goes through the mid stance to then propulse off, and then naturally goes through the swing phase as part of that. You have these pictures in the text, so you might want to follow as I go through this. So the hip is in flexion, but look at this, okay? This is called the anomaly. The anomaly is three bones that's conjoined, and they are the ilium, the ischium and the pubis, and then this is in a posterior rotated position. Whilst the hip is flexed, the knee is extended and the ankle is dorsiflexed. These two muscles, okay, tibialis anterior and tibialis posterior, will control the position of the foot and ankle in preparation for the contact phase. So they'll work in a isometric position, and then as you go to contact the ground through the mid stance, which will be pronation, then these two will eccentrically lengthen. Let's have another look. So again, I've got the innominate that is posteriorly rotated, the hip is flexed, the knee is extended, the ankle is dorsiflexed, and then the foot is inverted. All right, so that is just as we go in to contact the ground. Now the tibialis anterior is part of a sling, and where it attaches to on a medial cuneiform, it continues as another muscle called the peroneal longus, which comes around onto the head of the fibula here. But you can't physically see that yet, so we'll have a look at the next sort of picture. So again, you've got the similar sort of picture here in your text. So tibialis anterior comes round, and then it goes up to the head of fibula, which then continues as the tendon of the bicep femoris, and it goes up to the ischial tuberosity, and the studies show that it continues as this ligament called the key ligament by Andre Vleeman, and it's known as the sacrotuberous ligament. Okay, so it goes from the sacrum, hence the word sacro, to the ischial tuberosity, and that's why it's called the sacrotuberous ligament. Now this muscle tendon is part of a sling, and it continues by this ligamentous system here. Some people call it the osteoarticular ligamentous system. And that's more from a lady called Diane Lee, who's a physiotherapy based in Canada. Now, let's have a look at this sling system. So this is called the posterior longitudinal sling. And I've already mentioned we have a peroneus to the bicep femoris, and then it connects to that sacrotuberous ligament here. And also now it goes all the way up to the occipital bone, and it's part of a long sling, hence the word longitudinal sling here. It's also called the deep longitudinal sling as well. This is how it's utilized in walking. So you can see the person walking here. So this contact to the ground, yeah, is stimulating the activation of these tendon muscles to this part of the pelvis. And then this part of the pelvis, as we'll come on to, is known as form and force closure. And then this sling is part of the outer core, also known as the myofascial sling system, or the outer core system here. Let's have a look at this. So this is what we call form and force closure. So the purple rectangle box will be the two innominate bones, yeah, or the hip bones sort of. And then you've got the orange rectangle in between, which is the sacrum. Now, if we stood still, we would only need form closure because we don't need to move our legs. But because we are walking, we would need another mechanism called the force closure, also known as the self-locking mechanism, to provide stability. But what you have to remember is when you're walking, the right side will be stable, for instance, if you're contacting the ground on the right leg, whilst the left leg will be unstable. So we have a lock-in and a unlock-in mechanism for when we are walking. Okay, so we'll need a force closure system to give us sacroiliac stability. And then this is another picture where we have stability. Not only is it coming from the foot up, it's also coming down from the head. So motion of the torso, the arms, etc. is increasing the tension coming down to the sacroiliac joint, whilst the movement of the hip, the knee, the foot, as was already mentioned, is providing stability from below. Now the second sling in the system is called the lateral sling, and then this makes up, on one side we have the adductors and the gluteus medius and minimus, and then on the contralateral side we then have the quadratus lumborum. This is how it's used in stepping up, for instance. So when we put weight on the left leg, then basically the glute med, its main function is to maintain pelvic position here. And if that muscle is weak, the pelvis would dip and is called a Trendelenburg, as I'll show you pictures shortly. So the glute medius function, okay, is to maintain pelvic positioning for when you are walking, yeah, and running and things like that. And sometimes that glute muscle weakens, and then other muscles like the adductors, the tensor fasciae lata, could compensate as part of that. This is a Trendelenburg gait, or an example of. So the person is standing on the left leg, the pelvis is dipping down to the right. You can also see that we have a side bending position of the lumbar. Okay, so imagine the facet joints along here. Okay, it could be painful quite easily. The glute can cause, I wrote a book just on the vital glutes, and so naturally I spent a year or two just writing about these vital muscles. Let's look at the next one. This is called a compensatory. So when you step on the left leg, then because the body uses so much energy in the previous, the body will compensate and cause a compensated Trendelenburg pattern. So they end up walking with an odd type of gait, sort of pattern here, but it still relates to the weakness of the glutes. Now the next sling is called the anterior oblique, and then this one is part of the adductors, and then this connects to the ipsilateral internal obliques, to the contralateral external obliques, but also you can't see it here, it would connect to the serratus anterior. So when you step, in this case on the left leg, it is the left leg that's responsible for pulling the right side of the torso forward, like this picture here. In this case we've got the left leg adductors, sorry, the right leg in this case, and then the right leg is pulling the left side of the torso forward. So this is called the anterior oblique sling here. So obviously if you've got an anterior oblique, we have a posterior oblique. So this time it's part of the gluteus maximus, the thoracolumbar fascia, and then the contralateral latissimus dorsi here. It's probably easier to show you a picture when it's in running, and you can see the person's contacting the ground, and then it works in harmony. Okay, it's almost like a coil. So as the left leg and right arm is forward, it stretches, and then naturally on the extension phase, then these muscles work in harmony to encourage the propulsion part of the gait cycle. So that's the 4 slings. The problem we have is that the gait cycle continues above the lower limb to the sacrum, to the lumbar, to the thoracic, and even to the upper limb, yeah, the shoulder. So let's just go back to this picture I mentioned earlier. So we've got the innominate rotation. So imagine this is the right leg in flexion. So this has gone back and it's pre-tensioned this ligament in here. Now, we have a bit in between the sacrum, and you can probably see it here. If that's coming back, okay, then the sacrum will be in relative, they call it nutation. Nutation means it nods, so it'll be in nutation on this side, but the sacrum will be in a position of left rotation here. It's called a left on left. So if that's coming back posterior, then the sacrum is in a position of left on left, which means it's rotated left on the left oblique axis. Now, this is the opposite motion. So in this case, if the sacrum is rotating to the right, okay, so this side is in nutation. So the innominate on the left side will be more posterior. So this is now going forward on this side. So this is now called a right because it's rotation to the right. Okay, you can't see the axis in this case. But then what it does, it's like a cog in a wheel. As the sacrum rotates to the right, it almost induces the second cog to rotate to the left. But with rotation, you can see the lumbar, but as it rotates to the left, there will be a component of side bending to the right. They call it a type 1 mechanics, and what that means is rotation in a horizontal plane, if you like, yeah, it will induce a side bending to the opposite side. So rotation left, we get a side bending to the right. Let's just add on the pelvis here. So in this case, this innominate is coming back. The sacrum is going forward, so it's rotating right. Okay, this innominate is naturally gone anterior. And then as the sacrum goes to the right, the lumbar now goes to the left. Bit more complex, this one. So in this case, so look at the right side. Let's just do one part at a time. You can see the bicep femoris, the sacrotuberous ligament here. Now, posterior rotation, so this right leg is in the swing phase, okay, just about to contact the ground. So as this goes back, the innominate goes forward, okay, so it goes forward to the left on the left axis. So naturally this is in the stance phase, okay, so it'll be in an anterior. So the left side has gone forward, the right side has gone back, but the sacrum will be in a left rotation on the left axis here. I hope that makes sense. I guess on a positive, you can watch this time and time again. And I hope it does make a little bit of sense. If you have any comments, then you can leave them. But maybe watch it 2 or 3 times and just see how you get on. Okay, so any problems, just let me know. Thanks again.